Welcome back, class. Today we are going to be working on darkening up the values in some of these cast shadows here, and also a little more darkening on the wall area, and some other adjustments to the local color of the cloth. So I am going to start out with a burnt umber, which is a dark brown. So if you have that, you can mix that. If you don't have a dark brown, you could try mixing up your own brown. And you can do that by mixing up the complements. You could do red and green. And that will give you a nice dark neutral. And they're all going to be a little bit different each time you do a complement. You could try that, or you could try a yellowish color with some violet. That would also give you, so I'm mixing red and blue to get violet, a neutral brown. So they're all going to be a little bit different. To get it, here's the burnt umber. Now to get it that dark, you might have to add either like a dark blue, see how close we can get, to your mixture with your complements, just to get that right value. So you can get something fairly close. If it gets too dark, you could always add a little bit of this yellow ochre. Yeah, so you might play with it a little. So you can get, you know, almost any color if you have the patience and if you're willing to practice. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into that. Since I have some burnt umber, I'm going to start with that. And underneath each of these objects is going to be that darkest value under the bowl, underneath the the lemon, excuse me, the lemon. And I'll move on to the cast shadow here with the pear. So we've got the lemon and the pear. I just use the tip for that. Just keep moving around. I'm going to also darken this area with some burnt sienna. Or not burnt sienna, burnt umber, excuse me. So burnt umber is a darker brown. And I would mix that in. If you want to use the side, it's good to peel your pastel. So the paper doesn't get in the way. And looks like there is some burnt sienna over here as well. So I'm going to add that on top of what I've already got. So I'm just adding some burnt sienna. Let's see what else. Then I'm going to go into this pear area and add a little bit of this sap green to it. And I think I'll also decide if the apple is going to overlap or the pear. So in this case, it looks like it's the apple that's overlapping. So I will indicate that here by just changing up the value with a little bit of some red sienna. And I'm still working on those shadows. So we want, again, our light's coming from here, so we want this side to be darker. So I might lighten up this green apple with some yellow. Just to really push that contrast a little bit more. This helps indicate where the light's coming from. And I am not blending at this point, I'm just laying down the color. Okay. Add a little bit of a transition here where that shadow is. Looks like this shadow is darker than that area, so reinstate that a little. So I'm putting in some burnt umber just to darken that up just a little. I'm just softening up this shadow so it's a little bit lighter than this one. So it's like a bit of a gradient here from a somewhat light shadow to something a bit darker. Right, so I'm going to keep moving through my piece. Just adding some more lemon yellow to the sap green mixture. So some parts might be green, some parts might be yellow. So that's important to remember as you're working on your apple. You don't want to just rely on one color. So I'll create a little dip here. That's really going to help it look like it is an apple. And then I'm just looking for those areas of light and shade as I go along. So I think I might darken this up just a little, just to indicate a little more of a shadowed area. Subtle change. So I'm just going to keep moving throughout my piece as much as I can. And they also mentioned that they are adding a light Naples yellow to their drapery. So I'm going to add that. So that's also going to change this bright pink to something a little more neutralized. So it's good to look at the big picture when you go to do your painting. You do not want to get caught up in details. And it will help you move through it. You see it as, you know, one whole instead of all these little details. And they're also adding some, it said turquoise blue. So I'm adding some areas of blue here in the corners. Here in the corners I'm adding some blue. So there's some cooler shades of white. I'm also looking at the value, and I need to go a bit lighter. So I'm lightening it up with some of this creamy white, and I may have to go even lighter than that. When I compare what I've got to this, I think I'm going to have to add some white. And clean off the pastel. Always a good practice. Clean up your pastels at the beginning of a session or in the middle, so you don't mix any unwanted color. So yeah, so now we're starting to get, this is one of those lighter values. In the piece. So just just going to keep moving throughout. So it's getting lighter. And maybe I'll let some of that color, stay there just for fun to make that be more interesting white. Okay. Run it into the edges a little. I'm going to keep working on this piece as a whole. So it looks like they added some turquoise. I'll go ahead and add that to these corners just very softly. Maybe the turquoise from the bowl is reflecting. I don't know. If you wanted to soften that, you could just take that creamy white and go over it. It doesn't have to be blended necessarily. I'm just filling in. So I'm seeing less paper grain at this point, so I'm filling in more of the fruit areas. Now it's starting to get more finished. But you could leave some areas unblended just to make it more fun. So maybe I'll have a mixture of some blended and some not blended. Yeah. And it's good to just keep checking your values. I see this corner has a slightly lighter value, so I'm just going to add that. And you'll add. You want to keep that variety of color, like even as you're starting to blend, you don't want it all to look like one color ever. That's going to be kind of boring. Again, I'm following the form of the fruit. So here's our lemon. Haven't really given that one much attention, so I think I might very lightly go over that with some dark green, maybe a little bit of yellow ochre. That shadow isn't really dark, it's kind of soft. And then I want to make sure I preserve those lighter areas. Make sure that's nice and round. It's a little bit flat, so I might work on redrawing that piece a little. If you want your fruit to be round, there we go. Bring that up just a little. Bring that back. Right, I'll start blending in a bit of this Bartlett pear, which is red and green. So sometimes they're red and sometimes they're green. So I'm just adding a little bit of a sap green. So they've left a little bit of line in their drawing. You can do that as long as you don't get too carried away with too much outlining. Maybe every once in a while you can have a line here and there. Right, so I'm going to take a step back and just assess what I've got so far. So I think I'm going to move down here and try to get these items as finished as some of the things I see up here. I'm also going to go back in and darken up this, create a bit of a more of a shadow here on this pear. I feel it looks a little flat compared to its neighbors, so I'm mixing some burnt sienna and a little bit of blue just to create a little bit of a darker, sort of like a red violet or an alizarin crimson, just to create more form there. I feel like that got a little bit flattened, so maybe I'll just try to follow the form a little bit there. Maybe there'll be some interruption of that in a few places. Maybe lighten up this red just to show, you know, the light's coming from here. Let's move on to the lemon down here.